Well, hi there to you all, and I'm very pleased to be doing a very special session with a group of what we call analysts, the great and the good of the print industry, who hopefully will be able to give us a little bit of insight into what they think is coming at DRUPA, and not just in terms of product, but in terms of trend and just the mere fact that we haven't had a Drupal for 8 years means that things are very different. I think we all agree. And we're going to just capture everyone's thoughts a little bit. Let's go round the group. I'm going to start with you, Pat. Pat, just introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, I'm Pat McGrew. Been hanging around in print since I was 13. For real true industry experience, it's actually been about 40 years now, which is a little scary. I work with printers and the vendors who serve them to help everyone tell better stories and understand the technology better.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Pat. I'm going to go to Nessan now. Nessan, give us a little bit of insight into who you are.
Hi, so my name is Nessan Cleary. I'm a journalist. I've been writing about printing for nearly 30 years now, mostly as a freelancer. I work for most magazines and I run my own website as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Ralf, tell us a bit about you.
Yes. Hello. I started out in R&D for printing press manufacturing, but have been an analyst for 20 years doing statistics, market oversights, forecasts, and all that. And since a couple of years, I'm freelancing, writing for various magazines, online publications, doing presentations, and still forecast market sizing and everything about the printing industry.
Thank you, Ralf. And last but not least, of course, Sean Smyth.
Frazer, I'm not sure if I'm the good or the great. I don't classify myself as either of those two things. I'm a print techie. I've been in the industry for over 40 years, which, as Pat says, is rather scary. Although I didn't start as an exploited child labourer. I was a bit later coming to it. I'm an analyst and consultant for Smithers. I write various of their reports, get heavily involved in their market forecasts, looking at how things are changing. And anybody that wants to ask me, basically, as well as occasionally even get my fingers dirty as a non-exec with some real print companies.
Real. That's good to hear. Well, Sean, as you were just talking, let's start with you. As I mentioned earlier, it's been since 2016. There's 8 years. This has been very unusual. The cycle of DRUPA has extended for 8 years rather than its usual 4. I mean, a lot of the print industry kind of geared themselves up around that 4-year cycle, and we've just jumped 8 years since the last DRUPA. So how do you think the world's changed in the last 8 years in terms of the print industry? Sean?
I think you're right that a lot of the sector previously would wait for a DRUPA and they would gear up. Important announcement. I'm talking about the supply side, the equipment manufacturers specifically, and they would try to make a big splash at DRUPA, but the technological advancements and change have accelerated. I think we always used to sort of laugh about, this development, if it makes it to the market, it'll take another 2 DRUPAs until it's a real product, and I think that people can't do that anymore. It's going to be very interesting to see if this is a rejuvenated, thriving, important show, or is it the last knockings of a dinosaur that may be having to change radically if it's going to survive at all. I'm not sure which of these we're going to see, but I certainly think that the industry could do with a shot in the arm of positivity, because we don't seem to get enough of those at the moment. And DRUPA, whatever else you can say about it, it's always very positive. With the possible exception of the DRUPA song, of course, but we won't go there.
So we don't talk about that. Nessan, what's your thought on this?
I think we're just seeing more fairly gradual change. I don't think it makes a lot of difference that we've missed a cycle, because there's been a lot of development of inkjet, which is taking longer than would have anyway. We wouldn't have seen a great deal 4 years ago. Otherwise, we're seeing what we always have seen. A general decline in commercial print and certain areas like newspapers and magazines, move towards packaging. To a lesser extent, seeing more industrialized printing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, of course, is the external factors outside the industry are playing a much bigger role than they have done. So the pandemic was a huge boost for digital labels and packaging. It allowed
Mhm.
the brands to rejig their portfolios very quickly, but also the impact of the various wars that are going on, the supply chain crisis that's come from that, the high energy prices. These are all outside the print industry, but they're having a huge impact.
Yeah, yeah. Ralf, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, well, you can't please them all anyway with whatever cycle you're doing. So,
Mm.
4 or 5 years in the past, people always complained that it's not frequent enough for fast-moving markets like digital printing. There was the IPEX in between, which suited some. There are specialty shows in between where devices are being launched, Hunkler Innovation Days, Label Expo, and so on.
Mhm.
But then again, when DRUPA suggested they move to a 3 year cycle, also nobody was impressed. So I guess it's a good compromise, having it every 4 years more or less regularly. And obviously, 2020 didn't happen. So I hope it's back to a 4 year cycle. And in a way, I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Pat, so just thinking more about the sort of the last 8 years and the way things have changed. It's been mentioned already about digital. I think there's a sense, isn't there, that packaging's come to the fore quite considerably. Anything else?
I think there are a lot of things. One, Ralph, I remember that frisson of fear that went through the vendor community when they said 3 years in 2016. You would have thought someone had set our hall on fire. It was just incredibly scary to a lot of people to try and adjust the cycles. I think, Frazer, if I'm looking at all the requests that I'm getting for content, which is how I gauge a lot of what's coming in the next year, packaging has certainly gotten to be a bigger story. In previous DRUPAs, I mean, we called it the inkjet DRUPA, we called them all sorts of things over time. But this time, I think we're watching so many of the vendors who have a play in packaging integrate it into their DRUPA story. It's no longer you go to the packaging show to go see packaging, you go to DRUPA to see commercial, you go somewhere else to see marketing oriented things. I think at DRUPA this year, one of the things the vendors have to do to optimize their marketing budgets and to optimize their customer relationships, which often span segments, they need to bring everything they've got, every story they've got to tell this time. So
Yeah, yeah.
packaging, flexo, label, digital and offset. I think every one of these technologies has got to put their best foot forward this time. And I think based on what I'm seeing, that's the plan. Bring
Yeah.
every story you can possibly tell.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. We might pick up on that. I'll just ask one other question around that sort of that timeline that we've had 8 years or so. Clearly, the way people buy, and we're not just talking about within the print industry, but within all industry has changed, hasn't it? The approach to purchasing is different. People clearly don't just want to touch it, feel it kind of thing. They also want to review it. They want to hear other people's reviews. They want to see a video of it. Things have changed a little bit. Do you sense this is going to impact on DRUPA?
It's a lot more peer-to-peer conversations about what we should buy next,
Sure.
as a printer. Not necessarily excited about going to some dedicated vendor open house. They might wine and dine you and, give you a nice hotel room, but it's time away from your business. So instead, a lot of the printers that I work with are focusing on spending time with people like themselves who are in the market to buy, who are looking to grow their businesses, who are trying to figure out what new technology they can bring to differentiate themselves. And vendors are important, certainly, but their peers actually provide more advice for them than anyone else.
Yeah. Nessan, I know you've written something on this fairly recently because you were at the FESPA event and were kind of commenting on the different dynamic. Did you want to add anything to this discussion?
No, I'd agree with what Pat said. I think that we're certainly going to see much more different types of printers, and also more textile printing, more industrial printing. I would hope we'll see more 3D printing. The thing I noticed a lot at FESPA also was how good the Chinese equipment was. I think the idea that Chinese stuff was not as good as the Western produced stuff is gone now.
Yep. Yeah.
I think
it's an interesting comment, isn't it? That there are more Chinese exhibitors at DRUPA this year than any other one country.
And other vendors are not happy about this.
Yeah. Sean, did you want to comment on that?
I only hope that they have a better presentation than I have suffered from many Chinese vendors, including several at Label Expo last year, just to remind me. I don't really understand their business models, particularly. Nobody really understands what's going on in China, unless you're actually selling it in there yourselves. But we certainly we have a couple of Chinese offices at Smithers, and it's useful to get the insights. One of the really interesting things I think is going to be talking to people like ink vendors, inkjet head vendors, component vendors on what they see as the situation in China and the potential for the Chinese manufacturers to make a stand. I think there are still some issues, and it may not necessarily be in the machine itself, Nessan, but in terms of the support, the ability to upgrade, the understanding of it that we'll know that buying a machine is a bit more than just making a hole in your factory for somewhere to go, and I think some of the Chinese vendors have a little bit more to go on than that. But what's happening within China, the Chinese market, there are regularly companies I have never heard of that I see at the various Chinese events. And if you've been to Print China, the thing that had that absolutely blew me away was the energy. The fact that I had no idea where I was going was great. So I would sort of walk down a hall and see a label press beside a massive, great big newspaper machine and think, okay, well, there may be some rhyme or reason to this, but the numbers of people there and the numbers of young people. Now, sadly for me, that's virtually everybody nowadays is a young person, but these were really young, and I'm surprised they were let out of school. But they in there.
That's quite an interesting comment, actually. That the print industry, perhaps in China, has a big group of young people interested in it.
Absolutely, and if you talk to some of the manufacturers of that, yes, you've got some established ones, but these are young companies. Sort of, and some of them are doing extraordinary things, or at least they say they're doing extraordinary things. And some of the vendors that I talk to say, "Yeah, this is this is happening."
Yeah, Ralf, just looking for what the key trends, and these could be global trends or specifically print trends. What are the trends that are going to be key drivers at the event? And actually going forward for the print industry, not just DRUPA this year, but obviously going forward. What do you see the key trends being?
Yes, I guess a couple of things have already been mentioned here. I mean, more digital printing, obviously. That is where the market is heading, but it's already given. Pat, you mentioned DRUPA, inkjet DRUPA. It's going to be another inkjet DRUPA, even more inkjet DRUPA.
The fourth.
But it's also now looking beyond the print engine as well, looking into finishing, looking into whole workflow, and even beyond the printing company workflow, looking into integration into ordering processes. So that's getting wider and wider. It's a little bit the concept of Industry 4.0, which already has been a buzzword at last DRUPA, but that's coming more and more to reality. And other challenges also in how interesting, how to make the print industry more interesting to young people and to print buyers as well. And that will be also a big challenge for DRUPA and for the printing industry moving forward. Also here, digital print, digital technologies, digital connections will make the industry more efficient, more attractive, and also for young people joining the industry. So those will be a couple of themes. And of course, also printing getting more diverse. So it's not just commercial print, packaging, obviously, but also moving into other areas like Nessan mentioned into industrial, into 3D printing. So it's not just printing books, printing newspapers, printing magazines. It's a lot more that can be printed, and we're going to see good examples there.
Yeah. Did anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest megatrend, apologies, Pat, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, which is a surprise to me because we're 20 minutes into the conversation almost, is sustainability, which is the number one. I was at an event in the States, and even there, without wishing to be rude to some of them, these are hard-bitten, flexible packaging people, and they're all saying the same thing. Because human beings want it, whether the industry has to do it because their customers are demanding it, but it's the importance is the customers. It's the civilians, if we can bring them in, because we tend to ignore them too much. And being increasingly sustainable is important, but being measurably and demonstrably sustainable is important. And one of the things I hope to see is some of the larger vendors who have digital, who have analog, who have various other things, actually giving balanced, sensible information, rather than the digital guy saying digital is better, the analog guy saying no, analog does far higher volumes, the impact per page, per square meter is lower. I hope we're going to get a more sensible
discussion,
debate and discussion.
Yeah, Pat, you wanted to add something?
None of us have mentioned AI either, and it's sort of the ghost in the machine at this point, because the last event I was at last week, every major digital hardware vendor brought an AI story to tell. Some of them were more fully baked than others, but it's clear that look, machine learning's been in the machines for a long time. It's not new to us, but once the talk track exploded around generative pre-trained transformers, then everybody started asking the question, well, does your machine have AI? I'm not sure why they cared, but they started asking. And the vendors have, some in a better way than others, have come to the table with how they're actually using smart machine learning and transformers to create machines that produce digital machines, especially that produce better print quality, control dryers, control the power pull better. And power pull, the cost of actually operating the equipment, is part of that sustainability story that I think we're going to see them all bring to DRUPA as well.
And actually what Ralf mentioned as well, that sort of use of software, digital, that weaves into both the sustainability aspect, doesn't it, in terms of efficiencies of print, and also the AI, the link to AI, what I heard someone from, should we say, a very large vendor said to me, we're not worried about the machines. Everyone knows what our machines do. What we need to do is talk about the software and the way that software can make the machine work more efficiently. So this is an interesting kind of perspective on the show, if you like, because we kind of expect it to be all the heavy metal, the big machines, but actually it's these other things that are coming through. Nessan, did you want to add something to this? Obviously, I know you were at my AI conference recently, so AI is in people's minds.
Oh, AI is absolutely at the forefront, yes. I'm still getting my head around it. It's clear that there are lots of different types of AI and that people don't always break it down to what they mean. Lots of fear of AI, which mostly seems to come down to the generative large language models. There's lots and lots of examples of AI being used quite successfully, though, in printing. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly going to be another buzzword at DRUPA.
Yeah, I get a sense that actually, as an organizer of the event, that DRUPA feel like they've got to get a bit of everything in there. There's lots of key stories, aren't there, that they need to weave in. It's a print show, but we're going to make sure that there's topical stuff in there. I just wonder how true to those topics they will be.
Well, I think their problem has been they've had to organise it over the last couple of years, and a lot of this stuff is only coming together now in the last 6 months or so.
Or in the last couple of weeks.
Yes,
yeah,
This is one of the latest sort of points in ahead of the DRUPA for me to kind of understand the educational offerings at DRUPA. Some of the ones where they're paying people to come in to speak, like the DRUPA Cube space, that we've known that for some time, but trying to get your arms around what's going to be in DRUPA Next Age in that education space, which of the conferences are telling what stories as part of DRUPA. Some of that is still being baked, and we're not that far out.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Sean was saying sustainability. We haven't mentioned it, but actually, I'm not convinced by what you said there, Sean. That it is clearly it is something that people need to be aware of, and the drive towards
it's everywhere.
Print and package.
Every major vendor, every vendor
You're
that
right.
I'm working with, Frazer, has one of their top marketing lines is on sustainability. Every single one of them is trying to come with a story that says everything we print will not go to recycle. We are only printing things that will actually go to use.
I don't disagree with that at all. I don't disagree with that at all. And I think if we did a piece of research with the industry and asked them what's the top issue, they would all tick the box saying sustainability. In fact, we know that. However, I don't know whether they actually walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Ralph's
laughing.
Yes, if I could chime in, I mean, Frazer, you have been way ahead of the market with a sustainability show years ago. And it has been a topic for many, many years. People talked about it, and also the vendors talked about it. But Sean mentioned the big change, which is now happening, making sustainability quantifiable and comparable. And that's what the end customers, the corporates, and everybody is going to want and require also by law. And that is going to be the big, big change. And not vendor-generated data, but from independent auditors, comparable data, neutral data. Well, you still have to see how that really pans out. But DRUPA 2024 might be a good starting point and see where that is heading. It is an absolutely necessary development.
Yeah, and I totally agree that once things get into the statute book and there are rules and laws and standards and we all know where to go, then people will start to do it, like wearing seatbelts in your car or whatever. So I completely agree with that. I just sense that if we're talking to a kind of a typical traditional printer who's just trying to get something out, then perhaps his or hers, mainly his, will not be his major remit will not be about sustainability.
On a day-to-day basis, Frazer, I agree with you. We all know the difficulties. Will customers? Yeah, we want the sustainable thing. Will they pay for it? No, they won't. That's always going to happen, and always has since. The environment became an issue whenever it became an issue for the sector. My point is that at DRUPA, you're not focused on getting that next job out because you've taken the time out of the business to come and have a look and see what's going on. And as a business, yes, you might want to identify what the new machine that you should buy this year is going to be, or play company X off against company Y and get a better deal. But the other thing you should do is take some time out and reflect and look at your strategy, look at where your business is going. And that's what DRUPA gives whether it be hopefully not too late in the old town, but you have a good discussion at a vendor event with your competitors and other people. It gives you that opportunity. You have the opportunity of talking to companies that you don't usually buy from and listening to what they say. There, as Pat's mentioned, there's various conferences and the DRUPA Cube and various other people are doing events to get their customers together to talk to them. And I think that's something that they will need to, sort of get your head around. How do I build sustainability into my future developments? Is it something very simple,
totally
like changing
agree with
from one set of plates to another set of plates?
Yeah.
Is it going from one big print machine to another print machine? Is it using different materials? The answer is I don't know. But what I do know is this is a great opportunity for companies to think about it, because you're not focused on the day-to-day when you're a DRUPA. You should be focusing on how you're going to change your business, how you're going to change yourself, because that's what DRUPA's value is, I think.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And in fact, if we were trying to identify what the value of this event is, the true value, then it would be about going in there and coming away with some ideas that you hadn't thought of before. And
whether it be being re-energized.
Yeah. And actually thinking about, well, how are we going to, tackle essentially what is the next few years of our business? I think you're right. Absolutely right. Let me just drill down a little bit to all of you, really, in terms of what you're excited to see. We've talked about what you might want to feel as you come away from it, but anything you're particularly looking forward to seeing? I know there's a number of major players. Bob's there, Komori there, HP, Canon have got some interesting things. Durst, obviously Heidelberg. What do we want? What are we looking at? What are we hoping for? Pat?
Cool finishing. I mean, I'm a workflow nerd, so I'm going to spend a lot of time in 7 and 8 talking to workflow people to see what cool thing they've applied their AI and ML to make something better, right? To make something more optimized. But from the machine perspective, while I love all the hardware vendors and can't wait to go hug their machines, it's the finishing that I find intriguing this time. Horizon is moving 425 pieces of equipment to DRUPA in support of their stand and their partner stands. So I want to go see, though I don't know if I'll actually get to meet all 425 pieces, but I want to go try and find them. I want to see what they're doing. I want to see what the book finishing people are doing. I want to see how they've been innovating and making smaller equipment to fit into that short run space that it's slow. It does not dominate book manufacturing by any stretch of the imagination. But as Amazon and Lightning put more pressure, and Ingram put more pressure on short run, quick turnaround delivery of print on demand books, those smaller footprint sewn book block and perfect bound pieces of equipment make a big difference. So if I don't have to dedicate a whole, build a whole new warehouse to house my book finishing equipment, but I can actually move closer to my delivery point with smaller equipment, that's intriguing to me from a business model perspective.
Yeah. Nessan?
I would agree with you there, Pat. I think the
really?
manufacture, is going to be one of the things I'm looking at. I have a war against the pallet. Every time I see a pallet, it's someone's throwing money and time away. Get rid of the pallets. Do it in a different way, like the book manufacturers. If you saw the Starbook line at Hunkler, and the thing there, I thought that was really interesting. The way that software and hardware
and the footprint.
Hopefully, they talked about luggage handling systems at airports. I hope it's a bit better than those ones, but I'm sure the guys at Amazon know what they're doing. But I think some integrated manufacture. And I think that's going to be particularly important in the labels and packaging side, because a lot of the interest that I'm getting at the moment, and have for the past few years, is from brands and retailers asking themselves the question, should we do it ourselves? Because a lot of the entry barriers have gone when you don't need to have a gravure press or a flexo machine, or even a litho machine. And I'm quite looking forward to seeing, if, I'm not sure if it's there, but I believe it is.
I think we're in
the
violent
Alpha Jet
agreement.
from MGI.
Yeah.
Bob's,
Yeah.
or John Pascal's new toy that he's talking about. And there'll be a couple of other ones there as well, which I'm looking forward to seeing.
Good. So you're looking forward to seeing some machines, some actual
some systems,
bits of tech. Yeah, systems and tech.
I think that's the best way of putting it.
Nessan, I am coming to you, I promise. Pat,
sorry.
let me just go to Nessan and then I'll come back.
Just mute me, Frazer. Just mute.
Nessan.
Okay. Yeah, what interests me most is the interaction between the different vendors and seeing the partnerships. That always interests me when I come away from DRUPA to see what things came out of it. Like, for example, when everyone got together at the 2000 DRUPA, and that led to the formation of JDF. So seeing how the different vendors meet up and what they get out of it is one of the things that interests me most. In terms of individual machines, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the new Canon machines and seeing what they're going to do with the thermal print heads they're using and how much of a challenge that's going to be to HP.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? A continuous feed inkjet, isn't it? They're doing.
Yeah, they've got a label press and another commercial printer, but the key thing is thermal print head.
It's not continuous; it's thermal inkjet.
It's
thermal.
It's
okay.
TIG. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? So they're really going into a kind of competition with HP, as you said.
Yeah, well, HP and Canon together at the same time, separately but simultaneously, developed the thermal printing technology and both cross-license each other's technology. But only HP has really done anything with it. So it's interesting to see Canon now finally getting their act together and doing the same. So it'll be interesting to see how far they go with that. If you look at how much HP has done with that technology, they use it for everything from wide format through to single pass machines. It's in textile machines. It's in their 3D printers. So it'll be very interesting to see if Canon can make the same kind of statement with their use of it.
Yeah. Ralf, it's a home game for you. We're back in Germany. So I think we should be asking you, what are the German manufacturers are you looking forward to seeing, and what from the German manufacturers are you looking forward to seeing?
So yes, it is a home game, although Düsseldorf is the other side of Germany for me, being based in Berlin. Still a bit of travel. Now that is posing a tough question because I'm writing a lot for Inkjet Insight, so I'm very curious about seeing the inkjet technology and all the integration in the workflow processes and the finishing, as Pat mentioned. From the German vendors, unfortunately, I'm not expecting too much. So Koenig & Bauer, also with a joint venture with Durst, is probably the most interesting to watch because that is a company active in a lot of different specialty markets with a lot of different interesting approaches. So they haven't announced a huge new machine, but are going to show the VariJet and folding carton and giving examples of the other machines in corrugated and probably in direct to packaging and coding and marking and the RotaJet, which can be used in many different areas. So that is kind of interesting. However, I'd like to be surprised, so that one of the vendors comes out with something totally new. And actually, that's the appeal, the huge appeal of DRUPA. That's the only trade show you can go to and get really surprised by something totally new, which you didn't expect of or haven't heard of before. Because companies want to show a roadmap, what they're working on. So that's the one show that does it.
Yeah, I think that, and I guess the name that always comes to mind is Benny Lander. He is the showman, isn't he? What will he steal the show this time? Sean, please comment on this.
I'm quite impressed with what the Lander people have done with their machine. They've now got well over 50 installations, which surprised me, and they've got a pretty good roadmap going forward. They've got the first company has got 3 of their machines, and a few of them have got 2. So I think that certainly has come of age, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence that it's going to go at 11,200, just a little ahead of the 11,000 of one of the competitors. I'm sure that's pure coincidence in there. Interested to see what they're doing in flexible packaging, but it's good to see a technology finally sort of coming, and I'm very impressed with what their customers were talking about their machines in terms of the quality and the way they use it. Very easy for vendors to say how great the machine is, but when users actually say this, it was interesting. And sort of Benny, I'm sure will enjoy himself and have some interesting things to say.
Yeah, I think you're right. And anyone else want to just make a final comment on that?
If you've stood next to the machine and you've watched it print and you've watched how designers, I was at an open house at a print plant that has 2 Landas, and they invited designers, very specifically ad agencies and freelance designers, in to just come see what they could produce digitally. And watching these 20 and 30 something designers stand there with their jaw hitting the ground when they watched what was coming off of the press. So it surprised me in a way that that group of people tends to be quite skeptical, but the conversations between the designers were the things that they could do with the capabilities of that machine. So yeah, I always want to see what's next from Benny.
And also, you just mentioned in there about young people, and it's been mentioned in the discussion already about that drive towards, getting more young people in. We always hope that we can. Is there anything that can be done to change that view?
A lot of the associations are working very, very hard. Print associations in the US that we're working with are working very hard to recruit into the high school level and into the non-college attendee level to try and intrigue people in. But my favorite thing that one of the Midwestern associations is doing is that they're recruiting from the diesel and auto trade schools to bring people in. And their pitch is, hey, a printing press isn't all that different from a car. It has moving parts and electronics and computer programming, and we'd love to show you what we can do. They have actually been fairly successful with that recruitment drive, and it's one of those things that I'm going to watch to see if that catches on. I know in Germany, Ralph, there are a lot of apprentice programs that are still ongoing where they're trying to recruit, but I think at a industry level, we don't talk enough about what makes print exciting that would cause someone to choose to come into our industry as an installer or a technician or a trainer.
Yep. Ralph, did you want to
I'm
add
always
anything
fascinated
there?
when
Sean, did you want to add anything there?
I did, yeah. And that is before the pandemic. I visited 2 companies, Probo in Holland and Blue Tree Route 1 Print in Rotherham, or close to Rotherham. Both of them told me they have no problem attracting young people because they give them career opportunities. Yep. They understand what these people want, and they have people from universities applying for jobs for them, and they're having to turn them away because they offer great careers. The industry as a whole doesn't do this. It seems to think, somebody should demand to come and work on a perfect binder, loading sections at midnight for the next 40 years. Well, they're not going to. Yeah. But if they have great opportunities to do software, to develop really cool, smart things, they'll do it. And businesses have to change.
Yeah, and Probo's a good example, isn't it? Because it's in the middle of nowhere in the north of the Netherlands.
It is. I never thought you could have 3 hours on a train and still be in.
Unbelievable, and yet they recruit brilliantly. And I think that the sense is that, isn't there not, that it doesn't feel like a print business in there. It feels like a very dynamic business that young people want to work at.
Yeah, it felt more like a showroom for a variety of digital printing presses.
Yeah. And finishing. Listen, guys. Sorry, go on, Ralph. You just add, please.
Two things on employment, because I think it's an extremely important topic.
Yeah.
So one thing is the coolness factor of some print devices, especially digital printing devices, and mentioning Lander before just reminded me of a LinkedIn post I saw a few days ago of a French Lander press owners. His daughters wanted to go to his company on a day off just to see the press and get photographed with the press because it is so cool. That is a way to attract people with cool technology. And the second thing is people don't apply for a job like a press operator or a perfect binder operator, second shift, whatever. They apply to a company.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That company has to be interesting. That company has to be cool. It has to be sustainable. It has to be equal opportunities. It needs to offer growth potential. People apply for companies, not certain jobs. And that's something printing companies need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good way of viewing it. Because actually, that's what young people typically look for. They want a company that's got the right kind of values, purpose, reason for being. And, these companies that are finding it easier to attract people definitely have this kind of vision. Guys, I'm going to say we sort of wrap up because I am conscious of time. Thank you very much for your time. I'm hopeful that we'll see each other at DRUPA. It's been really useful having a quick chat. What I'll do is I'll make everyone aware of your details so they can get in hold of you because obviously you are very much in the industry. So thank you, Pat. Thank you, Nessan. Thank you, Ralf. And thank you, Sean.
A pleasure.
See you at DRUPA.